Hi, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of the All Things International podcast. Today, I am here joined by Dr. Erika Frydenlund and Dr. Jose Padilla. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. To start us off, if you guys wouldn't mind, could you introduce yourself to the audience, talk about where you're from, what you've studied, some of your past positions and current positions, and about your passions in academia?
I guess I'll go first.
Mhm.
My name is Erika Frydenlund, and I'm actually from Hampton Roads originally. I got my PhD in international studies, and one of my concentrations was in modeling and simulation. So I started at VMask as a project scientist while still doing my PhD, actually in transportation studies. And then with Jose, I've built a research trajectory in modeling and simulation and sort of first refugee studies, and then kind of towards humanitarian response, disaster response, and then more recently into some more creative things because we're research faculty. So we kind of also go where the money is, and that's led us to some interesting, I think, like arts-based projects working with stakeholders around the world, working to build a sister lab in Colombia through Jose's contacts.
Awesome, thank you. And you, Dr. Padilla?
She said everything. Kidding. Uh, my name is Jose. I was born in Colombia, small town in the north of the country. I came here at ODU, started my PhD here in 2005 in engineering management. Came to VMAS in 2010 about it as a postdoc. And I have been here ever since, working on the modeling and simulation, both as a area of methodology and theory and as an area of application.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, Dr. Padilla, we know you have a PhD in engineering management. Dr. Friedenlung, you have one in international studies. So, how have your individual areas of interest played a role in shaping the work that you have done so far?
I think that if I were to like say our research partnership meet cute was really over like dogs, just getting to know somebody who works in the research center with you. And so we started sort of as friends, and Jose was really interested in what I was doing for my dissertation because we met around the time I was sort of finishing up. And he basically said, yeah, I mean, I'd love to do stuff that works in an area that makes a difference in people's lives. So why don't we make a go of it? And we started writing some proposals together. And so originally, because my dissertation was on refugees in Rwanda, we started around that just to see where we could collaborate. Jose was all in all kinds of disciplines before he met me, and still is, I guess. But so we started with the refugee thing, and then we got some seed money and did some field work, and it just sort of branched from there. And I think we've been working together for over 10 years now, right? And um, I think in that time you sort of grow together too, right? Like he tugs a little in his interest area. We worked in a lot of making simulation accessible for different kinds of researchers. So it's not just for engineers. And, I've pulled in the let's do something humanitarian. And then I think we've kind of gotten to a place where we adopt each other's interest areas pretty readily.
That's wonderful. Oh my goodness, that's so wholesome to hear.
My case, engineering management, perhaps the most interesting thing that I got out of the department was that interdisciplinarity is important. In the department, there are people with different interests, different methodological interests. And that, from the very beginning, kind of instilled that chip in my head. So when I came to VMAS, then that interest, that seed kind of grew, uh, working with other people, again, other different disciplines. And again, when I started working with Erika, it just made it even more interesting in the sense that not only can we consider all these elements of interdisciplinarity, but also we have a common language, which is the language of modeling and simulation. So it makes it easier in terms of collaborating with somebody that is willing to do something of the sort and keep on exploring. The idea, for instance, of combining the work that Erika was doing with some of the work that I have done on system of system, for instance, kind of opened that door on the first major project that we had because ultimately have the component of the little bit of both. So it made it a lot easier. And then we have the modeling and simulation component on top of it. It just makes it like was a perfect match at the end of the day.
So you two have co-published countless articles together regarding research in migration and refugees. What has made you both interested in working on this topic?
I mean, I sort of mentioned it earlier, but the origin of the topic was that my dissertation was focused on refugee studies, so it's what I wanted to do. And like Jose said, we kind of had this modeling and simulation language in common, and so it made it easier to collaborate on some of these topics. So I mean, I would say I was the one who put us in that direction, and then Jose, because he's experienced in Colombia with one of the largest displaced populations the planet, he started connecting with things. He was like, oh, I could introduce us to some researchers here. We could have this sort of, um, we could at least explore what it would look like in another context. And so his language and his university context really facilitated us expanding from my Africa context to South America. And he's made that accessible. So really, it was Jose's willingness to go along with my original topic idea.
But allow me to clarify also that the work that we have done is not only about that topic. We also have been able to explore other topics, as Erika mentioned, things that are related, things that may not be related, things that have to do. Today, we dabble a lot of, like most researchers, with a component of the AI element. So
Right.
we're, especially as we try to focus a lot on the methodological aspect of how we did what we did. A lot of the work that we did was interesting in the sense that allows us to combine different methods. And even though we did that portion, there are a lot of things that we still haven't figured out. So how to combine, let's say, the insights that we got from interviews, the insights that we got from surveys, the insight that we got from modeling. There is always a little bits and pieces that we're still trying to figure that out. So I think that ultimately migration provided kind of a platform as an area of application. But that is just one of the many of the several things that we're looking into.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You guys have both mentioned that you both have experience in modeling and simulation. How has that impacted the level and the depth of the research that you guys have done together around these topics?
I mean, that's as I mentioned earlier, just having modeling and simulation in common, even though he's from engineering and I'm from the social sciences, became this like common language that we could speak and a common framework. But I think it's also that modeling and simulation is one of those things that's sort of topic agnostic. Like it's a
Yeah.
systems level thinking. So it can be
Mhm.
applied to anything. And that expansive curiosity about things is what sort of kept us able to, even though we come from different disciplines or we see things very differently, on the same page. And I think one of the things that we have found is that because we're sort of that duo that can speak across and each to our own disciplines as well, but through modeling and simulation has been a bridge to amass the collaborators that we have with us, because that element of the way that we think and the way that we sort of think about problems and try to pull them apart or find a systems kind of understanding of it makes us methodologists in a really interesting way. And that is what other people, I think, I don't know how to say you can say, but I think it's what other teams around at other universities and stakeholders have found interesting about us. And so that's been the motivation to kind of keep going with that. Is that's kind of it's our thing.
Oh,
That's a great question. I think that I echo what Erika said. I think that one of the most interesting things about the work that we do has been more on the modeling side than on the simulation side, because it allows us to have a conversation with people from other disciplines, being able to not only structure the discussion, but also, for lack of a better word, our collaborators, the people that we have worked with, they have come to ask new questions. They have come to revisit some of the work that they have done because of the discussion that we have had with them. And that is structure that goes about the discussions that we facilitate in most of these instances. It becomes very, very interesting in terms of getting their insight and getting to reformulate the way that they do things, and even the way that they have captured data, for instance. So just having that type of discussion in terms of how do we structure something as complex as people arriving to a society and having the society um, having challenges internal to them, but also in relation to those people. Having that type of discussion is not simple, and the modeling in this element facilitated that narrative, facilitated that discussion, especially creating a structure around that discussion.
That's so wonderful. I love that you guys have like your own expertise, but then, like you said, you have this common language that you guys share, regardless of your backgrounds, that allow you both to like pursue these wonderful research opportunities and even change the minds of others and their perspectives and what you do. Could you guys tell us about the digital humanities workshop that you had? I believe you took students to Greece last summer. What was the purpose of this workshop?
Yes, so me and Jose, and also Dr. Ruth Osorio from English, led a trip with students, and it was to build on a collaboration that we've been working on with University of Agder in Norway and the University of Luxembourg. I don't remember how many students there were total, a ton. I think there were 15 from Luxembourg. There were some from the University of Athens who came
Oh,
that were
wow.
all graduate students and they all are doing training in their own particular fields. But the idea was to come together on Lesbos and do sort of short-term projects on digital history of different parts of Lesbos. So we broke the students up into teams and they did some going out into the field and trying to investigate different cities or different topics with their team and bring it together and in a short term kind of come together and see if they could negotiate what a project would look like to digitize some element of history there. So it was part the experience of doing fieldwork and turning fieldwork into digital histories. It was part the experiment of bringing together graduate students from a bunch of different disciplines who are all doing different projects to sort of focus on one thing and see if they could learn from each other in that context. And we did all of this in a monastery that the University of Agder maintains in Greece. So it's also a really secluded location to just focus on research for 7 days. They have all the infrastructure they need, and the food is provided there. And then short trips out from that monastery take them to these very different contexts, and they come to the end of the day and debrief it. And then a chance for all the faculty from these universities to come together and sort of talk about what digital history looks like and where we can go with this.
It was a large group. I don't remember how many, but it was interesting. It was interesting in terms not only of the academic interaction, but also on the cultural interaction, both during the day and night. During the night, there was this faculty from the University of Athens that he tried to share a lot of the Greek culture. I even got to dance, so it was actually very
Ooh.
interesting. Imagine that. Don't do it that bad, so regular. But it was interesting in the sense that it was an opportunity of integrating. It was an opportunity of understanding and of him sharing the culture with us. During the day, again, was as Erika suggested, was the academic component. And I think that I don't know if there is a question, but it was interesting in the sense that the different cultures, not only in terms of country of origin, but also in terms of topic of interest, focus of interest, make it both interesting but challenging. I think that in terms of faculty, I think that we have less complication than the students, but ultimately just part of the learning process.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. What a wonderful opportunity as well. Are there any specific trips you've taken or research you've conducted that have majorly impacted you that you would like to share with us?
I would say that some of our early trips to Lesbos were probably the most impactful for my research trajectory. So a lot of my refugee stuff had been done in Africa. I'd been to Haiti. I had a lot of experience before my graduate program in Asia. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, I just didn't have a lot of interest in Europe. And we ended up in Lesbos because there was another project at VMask, a larger project, and one of the people in that project wanted to connect us with their colleagues in Norway at a like a workshop that was being done in Lesbos. So
Mm.
it was sort of like a blind date. We met with them on one of them online, and it very did not go well. I don't know if that was a cultural thing, like She was just really standoffish, and we were not sure how it was going to
Oh
go.
no.
But when we got to Lesbos, we got to connect with a bunch of the Norwegian colleagues that we're still partners with today. And um, I think it piqued my interest about this really small community that people don't put a lot of thought into and what it means to flip the script. We spend a lot of time thinking about refugees, but not a lot of time thinking about where they go. And I think that was a big turning point if I were to look back and say, just even academically, right? Like the act of thinking about something from a completely different angle. Not only did it eventually result in our first big funding win together, but we met the colleagues that we have since stayed with. It taught me a lot about trying to communicate what modeling and simulation was to people who were very skeptical and very anti. I mean, they shunned us at one point, and we were managed to pull it all back. Like how much being face to face and spending time like doing human interaction with people is part of the research process, like convincing people to play along. And I think those skills have served me um, and the ability to sort of flip the script on what you see and what you observe. It also served me. And I mean, we've been going back to Greece almost every year for what, 7 years or so now for various reasons. And every time I just learned so much more. So Jose and I have had a chance to go back to one of our collaborators who didn't like us at first either and took years, mostly Jose, to win him over. And we ended up going to his wedding one year. It was the only reason we traveled to Greece. And I think Greece speaks a lot to me that first time we went, that these things can end up as unexpected threads in your life. And I learned so much, topically about refugees and how refugee situations are managed. And I learned so much academically that changed, I think, how I think today.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
On that, I'd say that the more you travel, the more you get influence at the end of the day. I think that there hasn't been any trouble. I agree with Erika. I think that perhaps the place that we go more often is the one that we find the more insight about the things that we want to know. Note that the work that we have done in Greece is not necessarily about refugees, it's about the impact that refugees have on the location.
Mhm.
So, on the places that we have visited in South Africa, in Colombia, that has been the lens that we have been using, how the locals respond to this type of situation. And all the travel that we have done, all the interviews that we have done, I would say that they all provide an interesting picture of the question that we had. So we had interviews with people at the border with Venezuela. We have interviews with people at the border with Panama. Um, Even though those instances may have been a little bit on the, I would call it on the iffy side because it was complicated areas, but they were very insightful because from that we learned a lot. That's only just for trying to collect the data. And that's not counting kind of what Erika suggests, the work that we have had with our stakeholders, and also the work that we have done with our students in Colombia, for instance. That has been a fantastic experience for us just to be able to work with a group of students out of Universidad del Norte. It has been tremendously rewarding for us in a matter that, that's what I said. I think that all travel, I would say, if I were to be, I would say, glutton of experience, it definitely would be. Every travel gives you something a little bit different. So I would say that the more you do it, the better you'll be informed the next time around.
If I can add to that, that I think one of the things that's made us different in our ability to navigate that modeling and simulation lens and our specific areas of expertise and life experiences is that we really find a lot of value in going to the place and seeing it with our own eyes. So, learning that field work isn't always, making sure that you get 100 interviews in, but that, asking people if they can introduce us to something else or asking their perspective, even taxi drivers, like everything is an experience that I think we both value seeing in person, seeing ourselves. And so every trip is impactful. I would agree. So I would say the border of Colombia and Venezuela was also very deeply impactful for me.
Yeah, it's definitely one thing to kind of like do research and take the statistics you find online and meet people, over Zoom like this, but to meet and act like in person and be able to experience the same things that they were experiencing, providing you with an entire different mindset of like what you experience from your own like environment. I think it's definitely something very valuable. I have personally not gone abroad. I haven't traveled hardly out of the state my entire life. And that is something that I sincerely look forward to. So, have you guys ever faced any cultural challenges while performing work duties or conducting research across borders? And if so, how have you navigated those challenges?
I think ours will probably be different, but I would say I've sort of hinted at them before. We experienced quite a few cultural challenges with the work culture and ways of expression that the Norwegians have. It's been a building process to make that work. And I think for it was harder for me than it was for Jose getting some understanding of the Greek context. And I mean, even when you're doing field work, like there's also a gendered component, and we joke about
Yeah.
this, but like between me and Jose, we have the widest possible net for potential collaborators because there's just like some set of people who cannot remember that they've ever met me ever. And they see Jose from a mile away and they're like, oh, Jose.
Oh my
Even
gosh.
though they see us together. But the same for him. He jokes that like he's like, they left me off the email on purpose because it's just a girl thing. And so we joke that like also culturally we have this wider scope where between language and culture and gender and all of the things, we kind of have our bases covered. But I would say that especially in the beginning, um, we did overcome some sort of rocky and still do. I mean, I don't think it ever goes away, but navigating the cultural nuances of what people say and what it means to commit to a research relationship or to go in on a grant, like all of that stuff is still stuff we decipher.
Yeah, I think that the only that I would add to that comment is that I'd say that every time that we meet a new person, it's always a new cultural challenge
Mm.
because I think that we have overcome some. We have gotten to get to know some of our colleagues. We have gained some trust at some point, kind of in that collaboration. But there is always a new person that we get to meet, and there always a new barrier that at some point we need to say, okay, well, it's another person that we need to just establish that conversation. The cultural challenge is always going to be there, but that's part of the fun. I think that at the end of the day, just getting to it takes a lot of listening. I said it takes a lot of just seeing what they have to say,
Yeah.
how they say it, just to be able to have a sense of how, if there is at some point, there are some instances that it's a lot easier, by the way. It's not that it's always a major challenge.
Hmm.
With some people, just hit it off from the get go. But there is always something. Like I said, it's not only about the cultural in terms of place, but also in terms of how we do what we do.
Yeah.
Some people have a very specific way of doing things. In that aspect, we're just trying to understand how they do what they do and see if we can establish a conversation.
So I would say, if we're being super honest, even you and I have still cultural things that we navigate between us. And I would say culture is a huge part of the conversation that even you and I have all the time. Like Jose loves idioms and he's always like, how do you say, how would you say this in English? Like, what's the cultural value of this in English? Um, and I think even between the two of us, we are constantly practicing like disciplinary culture, language as culture, like, I don't know, things we eat, things we do, things we tolerate, don't tolerate. It's all negotiation all the time
Absolutely.
in a fun
And
way.
in a fun way. And that's even, again, that conversation we continue someplace else. And we're asking people, how do you say this thing? Or even kind of the original question. It sounds silly, but even the conversation around bad words or cursing is just a fantastic way that you can ice break with somebody. As long as there is some background, by the way, you don't go to a person that you don't know and you start asking these type of things. But
Right.
we'll see how quickly people open up. And it's interesting how they express. The last discussion that we had was with a person that we have barely met, but she was extremely friendly. She was taking us from point A to point B in Lesbos. Oh, it was fantastic. She just taught us so much that day, and we laughed all the way to the second point that we're trying to go, just by having a conversation. Oh, what are the bad words that you know? Tell us. And she was very open about it.
So, regardless of any challenges, the experience itself is worth navigating those and building those relationships. So, what guidance could you guys offer to students, like me, who are nervous about pursuing international experiences?
If I were being brutally honest, I would say that really in this technological day and age, there's absolutely no reason not to do it because there's almost nothing you can do that would be undoable, right? Like there's translation software on your phone. You can use Google Lens to read signs that are not your language. When I first moved overseas after undergrad, I didn't have any of that. You just sort of made your way and got lost a lot, and getting
Oh,
lost is actually part of the joy, which you learn over time. Like, I think that as an American, I don't know about you, Jose, but like as an American, I think we grow up with this sort of, well, I'm maybe older than you, but this sort of feeling of being ashamed of certain things, and that's why we don't learn languages as well because we're afraid we'll sound stupid. Like, we're afraid we're going to do something stupid.
right.
Don't. When I moved overseas in my 20s, I think what I learned, even though I'm painfully shy, is that nothing I was going to do was ever going to be not stupid. And so you just sort of learn this comfort with like, oh well, I'm just going to try it. And you kind of get over that part of yourself. And it's, I think, the thing we exercise the most when we travel overseas is like, yeah, we do stupid things. I mean, we have each other, so we can laugh about it, but you make mistakes, you end up in weird places, you end up with a taxi driver who, doesn't want to tell you anything when the last one did, and the guy's like, "What are you doing? Like, stop talking to me." Like you just things end up silly, and I think coming to terms with the fact that you can very rarely make mistakes that don't turn out to be an actual bonding experience with you and people around you, that most people are kind. Most people are just regular humans. There's very few people out there actually who wish you ill. And so you gotta just fall.
That's really good advice. Just fall.
To me, whenever I travel, I try to watch a lot of YouTube um, videos about the places that I'm going to go. That give you a sense of how to move around, how to, and they always give you good advice. To me, they're always the good advice of learning a few words on that language that you're going to. It goes a long way. It
Yeah,
does. It does. And you don't know when a little phrase that you're learning in Duolingo is going to get you out of trouble.
true.
You may never use it, but it gets you out of trouble. I think that for me, the parts that is the more headache to me that actually for Erika, it's like a second language, is the logistics. For me, just thinking about logistics is just so much of dread. Just like, oh, where do I need to go? What bus do I need to take from going to point A to point B? That makes it extremely painful to travel. Literally, it makes it painful. But if you're able to figure that one out, I think that with time, you're trying to have a sense of, and there are a lot of resources out there. The reason again that I watch a lot of YouTube videos is that they give you a sense of how to navigate the logistic component. But if it is a place that you don't know, then you have an extra burden. So for that aspect, for instance, what we have done is that we're trying to have contacts with locals. We have managed to, before going to a place, being able to say, you know what, is there a way that somebody can help us out while we are there? So it tells us where to go and where not to go, because some of those places are just complicated places. So that has
Right.
been extremely helpful. So having a contact in place and having the logistics figured out beforehand, it just makes the life a lot easier and it makes it a lot more fun.
For
But
sure.
can I add to that too? One of our best stories, I think, of recent times traveling, where Jose bestowed upon me an honorary logistics degree, was that we decided when we were in Luxembourg that we would eat every meal in a different country for 24 hours. And so we started in Luxembourg and we walked over to France. And so we had breakfast in Luxembourg, we walked over to France, and then we had dinner in Belgium, breakfast in Germany, lunch in the Netherlands, and then made it back to Luxembourg. And we bought
Wow.
all of the tickets as we were going, including like I booked the hotel in Belgium as our train was pulling up to the station, and we did all of it. And sort of to my point, like, yeah, it's crazy, and you have to have a particular kind of research bestie to be able to do something like that with. But also to my point that because of phones, because of the internet, there's just so much more open to people who want to get out and travel now than ever before. The only reason we could pull all of that off was because, I've updated timetables from these train apps. I downloaded apps to get the train tickets so we could buy them right there on the spot and then show them without having the paper tickets. Like we don't speak any of those languages, zero, except English. And we still managed to do all of that on a whim, which we decided, I don't know what, like 3 hours before we decided to do it. And that I think is the power of what people have now at their disposal to be able to go overseas. Like, yeah, it's amazing. If you want a deep experience, you need a connection in country, but you also can't mess a lot up because you have your phone.
Yeah, very true. All right, well, we are nearing the end of the episode. Thank you guys so much for being here with me. I did want to end on a final note. Just one question, pretty general. If you guys had one piece of advice to give to students of all majors, what would that piece of advice be?
I think for me, it would just be to get excited about being uncomfortable. Like whatever place that is for you. I mean, you said that you haven't traveled much out of the area. Like, you know, if a conference came up and you felt uncomfortable because it's like in Toronto, which feels far, but it's not, like just be excited about being uncomfortable, knowing that it's all finite, right? Like it's just 1 week. Be uncomfortable for a week. If you've never lived outside of your house, living on campus, like just try it for 1 semester. Just be excited about being uncomfortable because it really pushes the aperture. Is that right, Jose? Out so that you start to imagine new possibilities that weren't even open. Like it didn't even occur to you. I mean, that trip would never, that I just talked about, would never have occurred to me in a previous life where I was painfully shy and like, probably would have lived in a shell if I could. And that pathway was lit by this idea of being with other people who are like, who cares? What happens if we don't have a hotel and we have to sleep on a train bench tonight? Like, what's the worst that happens? And I was like, I don't know. I think stretching like that is the thing, whatever that means to you. Just stretch a little and be excited to be uncomfortable.
I echo that. I think that being uncomfortable is part of the process, especially of traveling to other places. I think the world are different in terms of how we approach traveling. I think that you can either do a big jump, a big leap, and say, you know what, I'm gonna go to X place because I have done it. I would say, you know what, let's go to this place, which is outside of the beaten path, and at some point you manage. Again, I try to inform you. Always be informed. I think that to me, the best thing that I can say, just be informed. And don't be afraid of just saying some words, even if people don't understand you perfectly. But be informed and be willing to just ask. I think that you can make an experience like gradually increasing. You can start you just slowly start expanding your horizon. There is no right approach. I think that to me, just it depends on who we all are. Some people like it gradually. Oh, I'm going to travel to the UK because they speak English. Okay, but some people can say, you know what, let's go to some other place far away where the English is not spoken. English is spoken in most places, so you may be able to communicate with most people. But at the end of the day, it just depends on the point of comfort that people have.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for the wonderful insight you've shared with us today, especially with me. I'm gonna take that advice to heart. I really am. I'm looking forward to traveling internationally one day. So thank you
Thank you
guys so
very
much
much
for
for the
joining
invite.
me.
Yeah, thanks for
I
having
appreciate it.
us.